Don't Worry Darling is directed by Olivia Wilde and stars Florence Pugh, Harry Styles, and among others. And in this story, it is set in the 50s or 60s, I don't know. It doesn't really tell us what time period it is. But essentially, it stars Florence Pugh and Harry Styles as a couple that are in this utopian type of suburban type of area that's in California that's essentially run by Chris Pine's character, and essentially it kind of has some reminiscence of like Pleasantville, Truman Show, a lot of those, and Stepford Wives kind of feel to it, and it essentially deals with Florence Pugh's character, who's essentially uncovering a mystery that's going behind these dark secrets throughout the film around this utopia that's being head by Chris Pine's character. Now I'll leave it there because there's some other stuff that I will be getting into more spoilers with on this. But before I get into it, here's a little backstory. Now this movie was directed by Olivia Wilde, who I've actually really admired I've always liked as an actress in the past, and I did hear a few years ago when she did Booksmart that when she made her directorial debut at that film, that it got a lot of attention and a lot of praise for it, and I could see a lot of the recognition that she was getting for that film because I heard it's really good. And going into this film, it got me interested because there was some like interesting concepts that they were kind of taking into it that got me curious on what it was going to play out like. But also, I've always been a good fan of Florence Pugh ever since for the last few years since she's been in the Fighting with My Family, Midsummer, and among other things. And she's just really becoming such a great upcoming actress that I'm always interested in what movie she does next and stuff like that. But with the biggest thing that this movie had going for it the most was a lot of the quite the buzz surrounding it with a lot of the controversy that I heard. Where originally it was going to be Shia LaBeouf playing Harry Styles' character in this, and from what I heard was that there was some things that happened behind the scenes to where Shia LaBeouf had quit because of his behavior. And there's been some allegations that have come out about him recently to where he's pretty much getting blacklisted from Hollywood. And he pretty much got replaced by Harry Styles, and then there was reports that came around that Olivia Wilde essentially replaced him, and that he actually fired Shia LaBeouf and replaced him with Harry Styles. And there's been a lot of weird debacles that have been going on with that whole story with that I don't really want to get into much detail with, but that was a lot of the big controversy surrounding the film up until its release, and also on top of some scandals on top of some behind the scenes stuff that happened between Florence and Olivia Wilde where they butted heads. And so I could see a lot of the attention getting with this movie and a lot of the controversy surrounding it with all the amidst with everything. And upon seeing the film, I can honestly say that this movie really left a bad sour taste in my mouth. I gotta be honest, this is actually one of the most disappointing films I've seen all year for me. And it's definitely one that it's one that I consider it probably might be on my worst of list for the year. One of the worst movies I've seen all year. And maybe now if it doesn't end up being on my worst of list or anything, it depends on what else I see the rest of this year. It may, if it doesn't make there, it'll probably make a dishonorable mention, but this movie had something going for it. It had noble intentions, but man, it really missed the mark badly. And I'll get into it later, but let's just say it has an ending that not only really disappointed me, but also really kind of frustrated me to no end of a lot of stuff that just really left a bad sour taste in my mouth. Where do I start with this? So, to get my pros out of the way, I'll say that I did enjoy the performances in this. I thought Florence Pugh really shines in this. I think she is definitely the highlight. I think she really carries a lot when it comes to the emotions. As she shows that with what she's done with her previous movies, like Midsummer, which is pointing out that's what the kind of vibe I was going into, seeing her performance in that movie. But she really pulls her A game in this, like she always does. She's a tremendous, talented woman that's working in Hollywood right now, and she really brings her A game to a T. And I can also say the same for Chris Pine in this. I thought that his kind of sketchy kind of guy that's playing the head of everything, he does a good job, but there's not really a whole lot of focus on him for quite the most part, where he plays kind of this this mysterious kind of figure that's running the utopian society, the utopian town and everything. I enjoyed his performance, but I could tell that there was a lot of stuff with this character that they don't really explain a whole lot about him, that kind of lacks a lot of stuff on the writing aspect that I think was that I had a really big issue with, that I'll get into later on. But the rest of the cast, they're fine, but I thought them two were really the standouts for it. And then the other praises I gotta say is I really enjoyed the production design in this. I thought that the way he was able to capture the whole 50s type of setting and everything, and the way that it's very beautifully shot with a lot of the colors, the kind of Pleasantville kind of look, or sorry, not Pleasantville, but the kind of, Stepford Wives, kind of like, suburban type of society and everything. I really just love the look of this movie and the whole desert feel that they go with and all that. And there is really also some interesting stuff that the movie was going with at first, or about the first 45 minutes, that I was actually on board with and seeing where it was playing along. And there is actually some creepy stuff throughout the film that I can say that did work for the first part and to its advantage, but honestly, that's really about all the pros I really have for the movie, because this is where I now get into some of my cons. And keep in mind, this is actually going to have some major spoilers with the film, because this is going to be hard for me to talk about without going into detail. So this will be a major spoiler discussion, so you have been warned if you haven't seen it. So to get into some of my cons, what can I say? One of the problems I had really from the get-go was I really was it was really seemed like it was going on a repetitive structure on this, because throughout the film we have instances where Florence Pugh's character Alice is essentially, going through the motions and stuff, trying to unravel some other things that's beyond the town of where she's at and everything like that. And essentially when it gets to a part where she ends up going to this secluded area where she's like near the headquarters of everything, it goes into some like artsy type of stuff that feels like something, and this is not a comparison because I actually prefer more his style, but it almost seemed like Olivia Wilde was trying to go for a David Lynch type of approach, and I can't really go on that comparison because that would be insult to David Lynch. But I'm just saying on that level of that whole type of being artsy for the sake of being artsy, where you see like these kind of weird images that are going throughout the film where characters are essentially hallucinating and stuff. And while visually it is really cool to see, and it is on an artistic level I can see what it's going for, but throughout the movie it feels like it's very rinse and repeat with that, because there's a lot of points where they just do a lot of the same fucking rinse and repeat of showing the same imagery throughout, with the whole dancing girls and stuff like that. It seemed like they didn't even change it up for it throughout it. It just seemed really off, and it just seemed like it was getting really boring after a while, just seeing the same shit back and forth. And then on top of that, there's some other things where the movie gets into more of its plot, where you're having to essentially find out more about where it's going and everything like that, when you find out the truth. And I'll get to it later, but that's also comes in a factor with its second half of the film, where it dives deep more into about finding out what's happening. And to be honest, this is really kind of making me remind me of another type of film where it tries to mix a lot of artsy type of stuff and tries to be very clever, but it seems like it's very too on the nose on a lot of its stuff. And a big comparison with that, honestly, is both Zack Snyder's Sucker Punch, which I really didn't fucking like, and the other one being the one called Only God Forgives, and that kind of that kind of way of the director essentially being very pretty much being full of themselves, and trying to stick out a lot of metaphors throughout the film that are trying to prove a point and stuff like that. But it just comes across as being very forced, and a lot of stuff that just doesn't really make sense, because I can deal with certain movies that have artsy kind of style to it, but when your whole point is just showing like certain things to disguise it and have bad writing, that does not translate well with film. That to me doesn't really translate well when you're trying to tell a story like this. And so I'll get into later, but one of the other biggest things I have too is, I'll be honest, I wasn't really too big on Harry Styles' performance in this. I've only seen the guy in Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk, and he was good in that one, for being kind of his kind of debut being in that film, and then also having like a small role in Eternals and stuff, where you can see that he's kind of on the rise, but him taking like a big lead role in this kind of film, it really seemed like he was miscast because the way that he comes across, it comes across as very try too hard, sort of, it kind of on that try too hard kind of performance, and you could see that of where the performance was probably intended for Shia LaBeouf of what he was trying to do for this kind of performance, because it seemed like had he would have been for the role, he probably would have made probably a better, at least performance level, because of the way that he can act in certain emotional scenes, and he's really proven himself to be an actor over the years in a lot of dramatic work. Harry Styles, he hasn't really gotten right to that point yet to where he's really been in type of movies like this. Now granted, I did hear he has a movie coming out later this year called My Policeman or something like that I heard that might probably showcase a lot of his skills better possibly. But with this one, it just seemed like he just really wasn't ready for this type of level, because a lot of his scenes where he's where he's interacted with Florence Pugh, their chemistry seems like it's kind of off in a lot of parts, and it just comes across as very generic. He's very, I don't want to compare him to soap opera level, but you could tell that he's just not very good when it comes to, I just didn't really think he was good with delivering some of his lines, the way he came across. So he was not that good at all. And then some of the other issues I have too is some of the other things that the movie takes a build on, it gets in that kind of like weird territory where you're piecing together certain things throughout the story, and then when you find out later reveals for it, it starts to get to territory where it doesn't really make a lot of sense when you really think about it. And that's now where I get into more of my major spoilers. So throughout the film, when it gets to the third act and we start to reveal more about Alice's life and everything, of where the truth behind everything, it becomes pretty much a what the fuck kind of movie, because up until that point we were seeing a lot of weird kind of artsy images and stuff, showcasing a lot of, I guess, the psychological trauma that, characters are supposed to feel like isolated and stuff. And I could see the intention with that, but it really didn't work for me after a while, because it seemed like that was what all they were doing throughout the movie, and it got old after a while. But the problem I have when it gets to this third act is the way that it tries to be clever with it being basically, and I'm not kidding here, it becomes essentially a fucking ripoff of M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, aspects of The Truman Show in certain ways, and also the biggest one, surprisingly enough, is a movie I saw a few years ago called Serenity. I shit you not, that's literally what the fucking the plot twist is in this, where it's revealed that essentially Alice, before she came into the town, she was actually living in modern times, where her and her husband, Harry Styles, they were having some issues to where Harry Styles' character didn't want her to work and stuff like that, and he was essentially trying to go into this program that was essentially run by Chris Pine's character, and as a way to essentially escape and try to build a life better for her and for their marriage and everything like that, by basically taking advantage of her and essentially ruining her life by putting her into a secluded area that she couldn't escape from. And the way that it plays along with this, I have two issues. First of all, it didn't really, when it came to the whole plan behind Chris Pine's motivation behind this, I get what he was trying to. The whole purpose was to essentially put all these to build a new world for everyone to essentially evolve in. But the way that they tell the story in the actual movie, it doesn't really make any. It doesn't really have much of a payoff, and it doesn't have much of a very interesting plot with it. Because now, if it would have maybe been something where, okay, maybe there's like an apocalypse or something, or maybe there's something else to where, he's all trying to do it himself, and he's essentially trying to, protect everyone from like an apocalypse or something else that's big, that's actually makes sense in the world. And I could see maybe that being behind the motivation. But no, this is your typical standard villain movie role where they basically put all these characters isolated, and in a way, it basically rips off fucking WandaVision with its plot twist on that too, that we just had last year. So it's not only lazy writing, but also what doesn't make sense is we're revealed that essentially Olivia Wilde's character, where she's also in this film movie too, where she plays Florence Pugh's friend in the film. She is basically aware of it the whole fucking time, and I question that because she basically explains that it was her choice to essentially, get involved with everything, but did nobody ever think to do any kind of check on her if she was aware of it? And also, I'm pretty sure they would find out about it throughout the course of the movie. It just makes no sense, and that also doesn't make sense with Gemma Chan's character, the wife of Chris Pratt in this movie, who backstabs him by basically stabbing him and trying to take over and stuff. And that comes out of nowhere because throughout the film, she's all supportive of him throughout what he's doing. But then, and also keep in mind, she barely has any screen time in this film. There's really not much development with her character throughout the movie to really play into that. This whole third act just gets really fucking weird, and not in a good way. It gets so messy in its climax that it's just all over the place. You have, Alice kills her husband, and she ends up, because her husband's basically in on it, on trying to, give her a better life and things like that. And you could kind of get the idea that he may have possibly been, brainwashed by Chris Pine's character, because they do have a conversation earlier in the film that's off screen. But even still, what doesn't make sense about this is that, okay, she kills him. She's on the run trying to escape from all the people that are inside trying to take her back and things like that. But she has a moment where toward the end she ends up coming across this door, or sorry, the headquarters that she was in earlier. But this also brings even more plot holes because she's going into this door that's basically like an escape, like an exit, kind of like going into the Matrix and escaping. But what doesn't make sense is that, okay, if we're led to believe that she escapes, then why was there a scene way earlier in the film when she didn't wake up, where she basically, she woke up in the same location? Are we led to believe that maybe she escaped from the actual facility? Because why would she go there and then go to the same door? It makes no fucking sense. But on top of that, why are we seeing a vision of her and Jack essentially, being all lovey-dovey each other when we just had a scene earlier where she killed him? And then she wants to escape. It's just like, the movie can't make up its fucking mind what it wants to be in this whole scene, in this whole ending. And, man, there's just so much wrong with this movie, and so much to where it just becomes a fucking headache just thinking about it. There's more I can really go into detail, but those are like some of the biggest issues I have with this movie. And a lot of the pacing, too, kind of felt very slow at times, where, it was doing the whole rinse and repeat thing, like I said earlier, and it did have some melodramatic scenes that did kind of drag out more than what it needed to be. But that ending really killed it. That really, killed it for me. That was just like, what the fuck, With that being said, because I can see what they were trying to do with it, I'm just hanging by a hair on this. I'm giving this an extremely, extremely, extremely low disaster grade on the Film Freaks meter. It came close. Believe me, that ending really pushed it, but because of some other things I still had, I can't entirely say it's complete shit, but it's hanging by a fucking thread. So, those of you who've also seen Don't Worry Darling, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.